Have you ever noticed that some otherwise very intelligent people believe the most idiotic ideologies? There are currently many within our communities that are now saying the most asinine things in regards to our plight and condition while wearing a straight face. And many makes enemies of anyone who intelligently tries to demonstrate why their belief makes no sense at all. While people usually have the right to believe whatever they choose to believe, however, there's a profound exception to that rule when it comes to the oppressed. The oppressed must function based upon what is actually true in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings are flawed, then all of our liberating strategies that stems from those flawed beliefs will also be flawed. This is why it's important that we fact check our beliefs. And it's important that we speak out against those false ideologies that prevails throughout our communities. It is why those who know the truth must teach. Case, point, and proof. Millions of African Americans currently believe that we made the N-word ours and that using it now ridiculously empowers us. But that's totally untrue. The truth of the matter is that the N-word was actually indoctrinated into the African American culture by white men. More specifically, by white social engineering scientists and white propagandists through a hidden science called negative media social engineering. This is all possible because those who controls a people's media images controls their culture. Because a group's identity is shaped by how they see themselves being repeatedly depicted within the media. People often becomes those media depictions of their group that they've accepted as being their reality. This also includes those derogatory depictions of their group. Therefore, because white oppressive forces controls our media images, they're able to covertly negatively steer our culture by negatively distorting our media images. This is because many of us imitates and becomes those derogatory media depictions of our group that we've accepted as being our true reality. It's a true science called negative media social engineering. It was through this method that white oppressive forces socially engineered us to sag our pants and glorified pimps. This is not scapegoating, it's the absolute truth. Because we African Americans were stripped of our true identity and culture during the enslavement of our ancestors, we are therefore more susceptible to negative media social engineering. It was also how they socially engineered millions of us to self-identify ourselves by the N-word. More specifically, it was by hiring black actors to call themselves by the N-word within those white-produced black exploitation films beginning in the late 60s. This is how millions of African Americans were manipulated to self-identify ourselves by the N-word. Those black exploitive films were well received by the African American population because they provided the African American population with a cinematic black heroes on the silver screen in a portrayal unseen in most Hollywood movies before that time. Therefore, many African Americans flocked to the theaters in droves to see themselves being represented as heroes on the big screen. Many black audiences believing that those fictional derogatory media characters were a true accurate representation of our group as a whole and collectively began imitating what they saw on the screen. This included self-identifying ourselves by the N-word. Then after socially engineering us to self-identify ourselves by the N-word, white propagandists fed the false narrative into our communities that we made the N-word ours and that using it now ridiculously empowers us. This is the truth. The reason why they've conditioned millions of us to self-identify ourselves by the N-word is because words, when repeated often enough, have power over their subconscious mind. When we repeatedly call ourselves by the N-word, this psychology conditions us to perceive ourselves through a false, inherent, inferior identity that actually aids the white society in maintaining their social dominance and social capital over the black population. Furthermore, during the 1960s, when we call ourselves brothers and sisters, this had a unifying effect upon our culture, which was determined to have been a core aggravating factor for that decade's unprecedented unified black protests. Therefore, by socially engineering our culture away from calling ourselves brothers and sisters to now calling ourselves by the N-word, this made it easier to divide our ranks. Remember, word has power over the mind. Now, here's another false ideology that's currently believed by millions of African Americans. It's the belief that we're not from Africa, but are instead the true indigenous Americans. However, the fact is, countless millions of African Americans have taken DNA testings, and those analyses have scientifically confirmed our African identity. The narrative that we're not from Africa is also fraudulent propaganda created by white propagandists. It's designed to separate us from our unifying African heritage. Without having a base identity to connect ourselves to our vast cultural wealth, over time we become further fragmented as a people and we become weaker as a people. We can then be made into anything the white oppressors wants us to be. The propaganda campaign that claims that we African Americans are not from Africa is also designed to divide us from Native Africans. When we Africans are divided globally, we lose our global numerical advantage and we're stripped of all hopes of defeating global white supremacy. The false narrative that we African Americans are the true indigenous Americans is also designed to create division between us and the true indigenous Native Americans. When the indigenous Americans and African Americans are kept divided, this makes the U.S. system of white supremacy much stronger. The oppressors are always made stronger when two oppressed populations are kept divided. This scenario of many of our people now believing many different false ideologies in regard to our plight and condition is by deliberate design. White propagandists have intentionally fed lots of false ideologies into the black communities to keep our communities divided and confused. The ultimate goal is to spread so much disinformation into the black community until virtually everything believed by the black population are lies that hinders our ability to unify and liberate ourselves. It confuses the black community to such an extent that no one is able to come to any sensible conclusion in the interest of liberating ourselves. And it's all by deliberate design. Now, the logical question now becomes, why are millions of us so vulnerable to the white oppressors' fraudulent propaganda campaigns? Why are we so vulnerable to it? The reason is because we've been conditioned to receive information, but to not be analytical about the information that we receive. We blindly accept what we are told to believe without critically thinking nor fact-checking what we've been taught. The condition is also called thinking without actually thinking. What oppressive forces began this process during our educational development through curriculums that does not teach us how to critically think. We're instead told what to think, and we are conditioned to never question what we are taught. This is why today, when false idiotic ideologies are being fed into our communities by white propagandists, many of us grabs it and just starts repeating it as being true. We are the white oppressors' puppets. I'm just one who can see the puppet strings. Throughout generations, our ancestors have always provided us with those they've given the spiritual insight and intellect to see through the oppressor's maze of lies and confusion. Those of us that are bestowed with this gift of insight must teach the truth. We must teach the truth whether it fills the room or clears it out. We must post the truth whether we're hated for it, berated for it, blocked for it, or if we're unfriended for it. We must teach the truth regardless of who it offends. Because we are called to awaken the sleeping African sheep, not to entertain the blind and lost goats who are now functioning as wardens of their own mental prisons. Brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up. The time of believing in dumb shit is over. One love and peace.